we're in a really amazing time to be a music teacher or to be impactful or any kind of work where your service is helping people grow and expand into more actualized humans. I think the challenges for a lot of music teachers is getting caught up in the fear of the technology that's coming and that they might be replaced, or the bigger world events, or just I think seeing music teachers as adults, it's challenging to keep the mindset of the curiosity that you had when you first started loving music and the passion and the magic that you felt for it, and to fall into that trap of just being an adult, like, oh, kids these days. And I think that's something, whenever I hear that, I'm like, what are you talking about? Kids are so cool these days.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Hello there, piano teacher friends. Welcome. I'm so glad you're joining me here today. If you have never met today's guest, Eric Branner, you are in for a treat. I recently got to meet Eric in person, and he is just as genuine and kind and gracious in person as he comes across online. Now, I have to tell you guys, the title of today's episode was supposed to be Trends in Music Education, and we do talk about that in this episode. And Eric shares why he thinks this is actually a great time to be studying music and to be a music teacher. But there was one story that Eric shared that really stood out to me, and I can't stop thinking about it. And that is about when he doubled his rates as a studio teacher. And if you think you know what happened next, you're probably going to be surprised. All right, here's a little about Eric. Eric Branner is a third-generation music teacher, classical guitarist, and entrepreneur. He founded the studio management platform Fons and now serves as vice president of business development at Peaksware. His career bridges performing, teaching, and building technology, and he is known for practical workshops, inspiring talks, and a deep commitment to helping educators build thriving careers. Passionate about blending great teaching with smart business practices, Eric empowers musicians to earn more, streamline their businesses, and expand their impact. Here's my interview with Eric Branner. Welcome to the show, Eric. I am so excited to talk to you today. We're going to be talking about some trends in music education. But before we do, would you mind introducing yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me, Rachel. It's great to be here. My name's Eric Branner. Working backwards, I'm a guitar player and an educator and somewhat entrepreneurial. I was also the co-founder of Fons, the studio management platform. And and I'm a dad living in Seattle, living the dream here. So that's the very quick, brief bio. Yeah.
Yeah. There's Eric in a nutshell.
Yeah.
All right. So Eric, before we get started, you might not know this, but we actually share a birthday and it's coming up very soon. In fact, I scheduled this episode to come out the day before our shared birthday on October 4th. So
what? That's so cool.
So I thought in honor of our birthday, we would play a little birthday game that I made up called Then and Now. And so I'm going to ask you some...
You're about to date me, aren't you? Okay.
Yeah. Well, date us. I think I'm only maybe a year behind you. I'm getting close to a big birthday, and I think you are not quite there yet. We won't talk about that part. Okay, so these are rapid fire questions about back in the old days and then today. So we'll start with an easy one. What was your favorite music to listen to as a kid, and what do you listen to today?
Oh, as a kid, I was right in the era of arena rock and grunge, and I loved that. Right, I on both sides of it. And today, I listen to. Wow, it's so hard when you listen to a lot of things. I'd say I listen to pretty much everything from classical to bluegrass to I'm thinking about what I've listened to, and modern rock. And I still go back and I listen to the classics too.
Yeah, so your taste has evolved a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. I still have my roots in there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Tell us what your childhood music teacher was like and how that has affected you as a teacher today.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I had a bunch of childhood music teachers. My first guitar teacher was just a very kind person who taught me to just love music. And he taught in a car battery warehouse. And it was amazing. He had a corner and I'd wait for my lessons on piles of car batteries. So it was a very cool kind of rural, very joyful scene that got me really curious and really piqued my interest. And I think I've held on to that. And my grandfather taught him, which was really cool.
Oh, wow. That's a cool legacy. Okay. What is the biggest difference you see in kids taking music lessons today versus kids when we were growing up taking music lessons?
Oh, I think the easy one's probably technology, but I don't think I, in my experience, between my experience and now, I think I don't see that much difference. I was in an era when I was studying really high level technique was all the rage, the shred guitar scene, and people bragged about how much they practiced. And I think that's kind of come full circle with the YouTube guitar players that you see now that are so virtuosic and, perhaps at the sake of musicality sometimes, but it's still very similar. Yeah.
Okay. This is our last question for our game. I know, right? Okay. Did you have more hair as a kid or today?
Today. Well, it kind of depends. As a kid, there was that phase where like half my head was shaved and then had like the long skater cut. So it probably balances out. Yeah.
Okay. It's about the same.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for playing our mutual birthday game then and now. But we're going to get into the real questions now. I would love to start with the challenges that you see facing teachers today in 2025. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing music teachers?
Pedagogically or just existentially?
However you want to take it.
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist. I got that from my mom, and I actually feel we're in a really amazing time to be a music teacher or to be impactful or any kind of work where your service is helping people grow and expand into more actualized humans. So I think the challenges for a lot of music teachers is getting caught up in the fear of the technology that's coming and that they might be replaced, or the bigger world events, or just I think seeing music teachers as adults, it's challenging to keep the mindset of the curiosity that you had when you first started loving music and the passion and the magic that you felt for it, and to fall into that trap of just being an adult, like, oh, kids these days. And I think that's something, whenever I hear that, I'm like, what are you talking about? Kids are so cool these days. And sure, we face problems. We've always had problems. There's always going to be a subset of our population that has problems. But by far, most of the students I work with and I meet and I know, and young people I know, I'm inspired by them, like I always have been. And if anything, I think a lot of them are coming around and becoming more engaged. So I think it's the general idea of mindset would be one of the biggest problems, and just remaining curious and not being bogged down.
Yeah. And actually, you kind of led me right to my next question, which was going to be about living in that place of fear. And, teachers are scared of AI. They're scared that classical music is obsolete, that nobody's going to concerts anymore. What would you say to those teachers who are living in that place of fear?
I understand. I know it's really easy because when you're a music teacher, you're also an entrepreneur. You're supporting yourself. You're responsible for yourself. There's so much, you're responsible for a community of people. So it's natural to feel that weight and that pressure. But I really feel like, honestly, I feel like you're not selling it. And because a lot of what we are as music teachers, I feel like a kid walks into my studio and they want to learn how to say blues or something. And they have they're talking about a really inspired player or something that's brought them to want to study music. Or it could be, a pop star. But to be able to, I love classical music so much. I love playing classical music. I love the discipline of my time to practice and the meditation of it. And I love how it connects me to other people. And I sell it every week, to where over time, I never pushed on kids, but a lot of times kids are like, oh, maybe I'm interested. I want to do what Branner's doing, and we do recitals, or when I do a recital, I'll often perform something that I just think is really beautiful, that I really love to play. And even if they don't do it, I think over time they respect it and they appreciate it. So again, I feel like a lot of it can boil down to your mindset and your energy and what you bring into the studio. So what I would say is invest in yourself and find that spark that you once felt that made you fall in love with music, right? What was the pop star that your parents hated, right? They found that CD and they like broke it or whatever. And they're like, you're not listening to this in my house. That felt so good. It's rebellious or whatever. And whatever that energy was of how you used to hear music, if you're in the trap of thinking, God, music today sucks, or oh, kids these days, like that's not a growth mindset, and it's more indicative of you than it is of the culture.
Yeah. And as music teachers, we have such a privilege and this honor of bringing music to these kids and introducing them, like you were saying about selling it, introducing them to this whole world of music that's out there that they otherwise might not know about, right?
Yes. And it is a great gift. And I think one of the gifts I've been able to, my grandfather was a concert classical pianist and a big band leader. He was awesome. My dad was a serial entrepreneur, always was spinning up companies. So I had a lot of support in both those worlds. But when I got to start a tech company, which I'd never done before, and being in that world for 7 or 8 years where I was on the every day speaking with lawyers, accountants, engineers, and managing this big ball of what became Fons, I was constantly reminded, of how much teaching music prepared me for that and how much learning music prepared me for that. I knew nothing about technology when I started Fons. And I became really grateful for how music taught me to solve problems. And I became really vocal about that with the students I worked with, about how cool is that? Like, I think I'm actually really prepared to run a tech company because I was a classical guitar player. Isn't that cool? And I think it's this great skill set that you're given. And we should be grateful that we get to pass that on to people, because now that I'm at the other side of that and moving on to doing different things in my work, the thing that I am most inspired by is the time that I spent teaching. I think that's still the great work in my life, right? And this thing that I'm doing in the business world, I really love that. I love connecting with people, but I have been around long enough to see that the great impact that I've made on my community and now the world has been the thousands of teachers or kids that I've gotten to teach over the years, being out there, and I see them commenting on things, kind of maybe something that I would have whispered in their ear, right? And this is my favorite thing, is that this happens to every teacher. And I love, and I'm sure it's happened to you. You've been teaching long enough and an adult walks up to you. Maybe you see them at a wedding and they say something to you like, do you remember that time that you said, you have no idea what they're talking about? Like that was a different you. And they're like, that moment that you shared that piece of information, it changed everything for me. And they happen when and you're like, oh, that's so great. Of course, I don't remember saying that at all, but I'm so glad that it had that impact on you. So yeah, that's kind of my grateful heart about teaching.
Yeah, and I think back to the things my own teacher said, and I still hear her voice in my head, and I often say those exact same things to my students that I remember her saying to me. Yeah. So in your work with Fons, I know that you interact a lot with music teachers all around the world. I would love to hear your thoughts on how the music teacher student model is perhaps changing. I think when we were younger, it was all about one-on-one private lessons. What are you seeing today that teachers are doing? Maybe that's still what most people are doing, but is that evolving?
I think that it's absolutely evolving, and it's also returning to basics. I think it's a great question. And when posing that question or considering that, why would we change the models for how we're teaching, right? If our job as teachers is to share this information and to develop people, whatever your goal as a teacher is, how you want to develop your student, I think that the changes that are happening now, some of them have been financial, like the idea of, let's do group classes, so I can make more per hour. And I can also reach more students. You can really sell the idea of, I'm going to do 20, or I'm going to do group piano classes. I've always loved doing group classes with my students. And part of my value proposition as a teacher from the time I started was I really understood the power in bringing all these kids together. And kind of in the top of my head, I after I'd been teaching for a couple of years, I had this cohort of just super cool kids, roughly the same age. And they ended up kind of growing up together. And I noticed how they interacted when they'd come into the lesson and how they talked to each other. So I'd start to have the lessons overlap. And it wasn't necessarily for a financial reason. It was more for the idea of, oh, wow, part of what I teach is people skills, is listening, not just to music, but listening to people and listening for emotion and how people express and how you can express yourself. And it's great to have a cohort of people to have that around. So to answer your question, where I feel right now is I'm really returning in my observation of what's going on in the world and acceptance of how things are shifting technologically. I see this massive opportunity to return maybe how things used to be. Have your students write their scores out, and experience what it's like to feel a pencil on a great piece of manuscript paper and sell them on that being tactile and human. Teach them how to share a piece of music for a room full of kids, their same age, boldly. Because if you can do that, that's way more difficult than giving a speech. And so I honestly, personally, I'm really wanting to, in my dream world, I would have a full studio of one-on-ones where there was a cohort again of all ages. And because I think, and this is just my personal season, is the way I grew up having a teacher that I was really serious about with per given period of time. That relationship is so powerful in today's world. I am a safe, trusted human that is not your parents, that you can talk to me about anything. As long as it's not dangerous, I'll tell you the truth as an adult. You will appreciate that forever. I'll appreciate knowing you and your energy and seeing you grow and playing music together now and when you're an adult. And I almost feel like, for me, the evolution of music teaching, and I'm not talking about tech, like, oh, we're going to use a tablet in our lessons or something like that. The core essential of teaching, I think the biggest opportunity right now is to sell it maybe the way more it used to be, as a one-on-one, as far as, this is, of course, I'll offer groups. Of course, I'll do these different things to have more access, more equity, reach more people. But as an entrepreneurial business person and a music teacher, you have to say, how can I best impact the world 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? How can I impact the most people? How can I reach the most people with the knowledge that I have, or the thing that I'm really curious about? And so then you have these layers where you're like, yes, as a music teacher, maybe I put up YouTube videos every week, right? Because those are really helpful. Then I have some group classes so I can reach out to people who otherwise couldn't teach music. And then I do my one-on-ones. And then you've got yourself this kind of flywheel of existence that's really energetic and empowering, and you want to keep doing it. And, for me, it's like retirement's the furthest thing from my mind. I want to teach till I keel over. And I have a great story in that my best friend, he married the granddaughter of a very famous cellist educator. He was the founding member of the Curtis School, right? And, so well known, taught so many people. And little to my knowledge, I didn't realize this until the wedding. This is the side story, is I was playing music in their wedding, did not really get the full reality that all of these strings glitterati were at this wedding. And here I am, this kind of like, redneck classical guitar player playing in this wedding thing, sweating. She's like, wow. But the thing I took away from that is he was, I think, 97 or 98 at that time. And Orlando Cole was his name. He's still teaching. And so the students from Curtis would go to his apartment. And I got to hang out with him. And he just, like, when I tell the story, it makes my arm hair stand up, because I was like, that's the vibe. Like, why would you ever want to stop doing this? And I think he taught till he was like 103.
Oh my goodness.
And he had so much to give. So it's a long answer, but hopefully it wasn't too meandering. But heck, it's a podcast.
No, it was really good. You mentioned group classes and doing groups for financial reasons. And it's interesting. I've had a few piano teacher friends, transition a lot of their students to groups. And when they've done that, they've said, like, financially, this is going to make a lot more sense, per hour and everything. But now that they've been doing it for a while, they talk about the community aspect of it and how the kids have formed these little communities and how the kids love to come and see their friends and interact with their friends. And they're not talking about the finances anymore. They're talking about how beneficial it's been for their students. And I think that's really interesting. And I love that.
And what a great piece of wisdom too, if you can almost begin with that end in mind. It's really hard because we're often struggling to try to just make a living and do that thing. But if you can really focus on the fact of the little gangs, the little micro communities that you'll make, how much joy they'll bring and how many more students that will bring into your studio over time because the vibe's so good. And I think honestly, it's something over time. I think School of Rock has done well because traditionally I've always been, that's not my thing, whatever. But I've known a lot of kids that have gone there or start and experienced it, and they did a good job of creating community, right? And so maybe you're not getting the most, sophisticated educational model, but it's really fun, and you go and hang out with your friends, and you get to do a show. So it's like, yeah, I really value that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if it's not fun, kids don't want to do it, right?
No, not unless they see the end, or not unless they have something. It cannot be fun, but if it's their home, if it's their community, then that's enough. That's another thing, to feel part of something.
So you mentioned earning a living, and I know that you are a big proponent of teachers charging a fair market rate. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's so important to you and why you've kind of spread this word that we need to be charging what we're worth?
Yes. And I think that there's a little bit of a story, but it's become kind of the through line of my entire ethos over the last 20 years. And it began, I think, in the early 2000s, around 2003. I was teaching in a music school, or 2001, I was teaching in American music over in Fremont, really cool music school with a bunch of great teachers. And we'd kind of hang out. And that was a kind of early internet. And there was a guy in town who was an early internet guitar teacher named Rob Hampton. And Rob was this guy who taught the now billionaire families in Seattle. You can imagine him, but he taught them all. And he had a waiting list, like 2 or 3 years long. And we'd go to his website and he'd say waiting list, 2 to 3 years. And he was a psychology major, I think, from Stanford. He wouldn't mind me saying this, he's a good friend. He's like probably an intermediate, uppermediate level guitar player, but he was a renowned teacher. And he was charging 3 to 5 times more than anybody I knew, more than my teachers. He was charging a lot. We were watching that and just thought, that's crazy, and we heard about him because students would call our school and say, I tried to get in with Rob Hampton, but, since he wasn't available, do you have somebody there? So that was the first thing that kind of, we were like, wow, there's something to this. Like, this person's making an incredible living. And this is in the early 2000s. And then my next move was about maybe 5 years later when we were starting a family. I was looking at leaving teaching. I had a really cool music studio downtown in Seattle. My wife was running my studio. I was really packed. It was really fun. But it was time. We're starting a family. Allison was pregnant. We're going to do something new. I'll probably go get an MBA or go to law school, like I'd always talked about doing. And one of my students, who was a supreme mentor in my life, he had just turned 60 when I started studying with him. And he was like, Branner, just double your rates, dude. Like, don't quit. Nobody cares. Don't go become a lawyer. Just double your rates. It's fine. And I was like, no way, Butler. I'm not doing that. We very reticently, I ended up doing this. And so I guess it was right around 2005. All of a sudden, I doubled what I was making overnight. And when I did that, my heart, I was like, wow, I'm buying this house. I'm raising my family. None of my students cared. And I want to just kind of go to dive into this idea a little bit, because I know some things that might be sneaking into your mind as I tell the story. So anyway, the second thing that happened, aside from making a great living, raising a family, being so grateful for the work that I was doing, is my phone started ringing off the hook. I learned the reality that this guy, Rob, had figured out like 5 years before, that by charging more, that made more people want to work with me, right? And so I became just inundated with people, and I raised my rates again. because I was like, oh my God, I tried to slow it down. And the more I raised my rates, the more phone calls I got. And it all kind of came together. And I want to take a side note on this adventure and this journey, and that the beautiful thing about this is now I was making a serious living. I was making really good money, even for Seattle, and I was really comfortable, and I was really enjoying my existence and doing great work. Is because of that, if someone came to my studio who wanted to work with me that didn't have any money, I didn't even care. I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, yeah, fine. Don't pay me, or pay me what you can. It didn't matter anymore. I was able to actually, through charging more and creating a professional business model, I was able to earn more, but I was also able to give freely to create a more equitable system in my studio, which I didn't plan on that either. So all these little side realities and realizations started popping up through this experience. And then from that, I looked around and I realized now I was getting phone calls, or my teacher was getting phone calls because they tried to get in with me first, and I was busy. And my teacher was a much better guitar player than I was, but I was getting more phone calls. And so this whole thing kind of turned into more of a mission that became what was the basis for Fons, which is like, wait, music teachers should and can be really respected professionals in their community. And now more than ever, if you're someone who can light up a child, if you can bring joy into a child's heart, if you can spark curiosity into their heart, parents are willing to do anything to have that, because it's so important to them. And they see how much of that they're not getting when they're on their screens or they're on the couch. So that became a mission of saying, hey, you can do this too, because there's no competition. If I charge X and I can convince you to do the same thing down teaching a different instrument in another state, all we're doing is just ramping it up to where over time, the goal was for music teachers to be treated more like the professionals that they are, as opposed to the mindset of what we carried for so long, which is, I'm a musician, I guess I'll just teach. I deserve to be broke. Like, so long story, but.
No, that was a great story. Thank you for sharing. I don't think I've ever heard you tell it quite like that. So that was great. So you mentioned Fons. How did that lead into Fons? And tell us about how you started Fons and what it is, who it's for.
Sure. Well, that was we cruised right along for maybe the next 10 years or so, 11 years or so. And then I guess it's that every decade, just having that itch of being like, hey, I think it's time to maybe be doing something else, maybe to learn something new, maybe to try something else out. And I started again reaching out into the universe and was thinking, maybe I'll go to law school. Maybe I'll get that MBA. Who knows? And I just had this opportunity to basically build a tech company from scratch. I had a co-founder who was a household name in Silicon Valley. I had taught their kid. He had recently had a big exit for one of his companies, was looking to do the next thing. And he started looking at my model and be like, hey, why don't you automate all this stuff? Like at that time, my wife, Allison, was doing all my invoicing and running the school and doing my schedule. And it was taking her a lot of time, 10, 15 hours a week, because I had a really big studio. And he's like, why don't we just put all this into an app and automate it? And let's just automate your school and see what happens. And so that just popped out of nowhere. I said, universe, I want to try something new. Months later, I'm sitting in a room full of designers, engineers, lawyers, like everybody putting this stuff together to start talking about wireframing out. That's like basically creating a drawing of what the app will look like with a small team. And that became this new project. And I remember being so, I don't think arrogant's the word, but just really confident that the way I was running my business was the way to run a studio. I was earning great money. I was really busy. And it was such a reckoning when math and reality came into it. For instance, I was sending out invoices. And I'll be honest, at the time when Fons was first built, I'd been teaching full time for, 18 years, 15 years. I had $8,000, $7,500 or $8,000 in outstanding invoices that never got paid, just sitting there. And these people went through my books and they went through my schedule and they followed Allison around and they found all these inefficiencies. And they also found out what I avoided, which is I hated talking about money. I kind of had Allison do that. I hated asking kids. If there was a kid in my studio that I thought had a check in their pocket, I wouldn't ask for it because I thought it was so lame to ask about money. But at the same time, this was 2016. We started brainstorming Fons. I did not want to do credit cards. I was like, they're like, why don't you automate your payments like every other business in the world? And I was like, nope, we can't do that. I'm not paying that. That can't happen. Fons needs to be an automated invoicing. I lost every fight because they're like, everything you're doing, it's not really respect. Your students are professionals. You're treating them like this is a yard sale. Like what, like, so why don't you give them a professional experience? They don't want to open your invoices, Branner. They just want to pay you. So why don't you do this? And so I was the first customer of Fons, and I really got beat up. My whole system changed. And so when we launched, what was really interesting and also unfortunate is that they were right about everything, which is that in the first month of me running Fons, I was still teaching my full studio. And it was very simple at the time. The first billing model was the per appointment, kind of like Uber style, where you just put your credit card in, you come to the lesson, it automates the cancellation policy, and after your lesson's over, your car gets billed. And so it was a real turning how I'd done things on my ear, but I went to $0 outstanding. And like, how's that feel? Everybody paid you. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then a credit card declined. And we wrote into the system a way to ask really nicely to update your credit card and try it again. And they basically took my insecurities and my neuroses about talking, and they baked it all onto this platform around me over the next 18 months. And I was still teaching. My wife went and got another job. I was running the studio myself. And so we knew we had this really cool idea. And then from there, in that whole process, I just started, I love to talk to people. And I started talking to every music teacher I could find. And what was really interesting is as soon as Fons launched, academic tutors and personal trainers started using it too. And we're like, whoa, personal trainers are super motivated. Like they don't need mindset help. They are ready to take over the world. It's goal oriented. It's like, wow, okay. So we started looking for these different best business practices that we could bake into it. And one of the interesting things about Fons is a lot of people think, oh, it doesn't have this feature, doesn't have that feature. But all of that's actually mindful. The app is really built to choose a pathway that has little friction and is super fair for you and your students. Because just if I railroad through a tough policy and say, Rachel, I don't care if your kid's sick, you're going to pay me. And no, I don't do risk schedules. And this is all rigid and this and that. That's great. But you, Rachel, being me teaching your child, in the back of your head, you're like, he's cool and all, but that kind of rubs me the wrong way. So we wanted to really create beautiful relationships in respect to the fact that most students, if you're awesome, stay with you for 4, 5, 7 years, right? And there's a term called the LTV, the lifetime value of a student can be $8, $10, $12, $15,000. So it makes sense to have a professional system to run your studio. Another long answer, but anyway, you're asking great questions that.
Well, I appreciate you going into detail. Well, as you know, I use Fons every day and I love it. And you're right. It simplifies so many things and automates so many parts of the business. I can't imagine if I had to do all of that by hand, it would be a nightmare. I mean, many of us musicians are artist types and we don't do well with invoices and billing and all of those things. So having that part taken care of makes my life so much better and makes me a happier human being. So thank you.
Thank you. And even if I think more importantly than I really appreciate you saying that, more importantly, the platform is to make because you can piece this together in a myriad of ways. And the more important thing is that mindset we keep coming back to. I'm going to get paid on time. I'm not going to be talking about money. So I'm going to create a system that doesn't maybe have to be reminding a 7-year-old to pay me because that's weird. I'm not going to ask a parent in front of a 7-year-old where their check is. I'm not going to take Venmo because that's weird. It's explicit. It's not unless it's the business version. Setting yourself those, whether you have a platform or whether you just decide to do it yourself, the important thing is to make that decision. Because the truth is, I wasn't doing that before. I had a tech stack before Fons started of all those 2015 different apps. Here's my accounting app. Here's this, here's that to run my business. And I look back and at the core of it, I still wasn't making strong decisions that respected myself, that respected my career, meaning the profession, and that respected my students, right? And those 3 things are really important. is what you're doing right now is, are you showing respect towards the profession? Are you displaying to your students that music teaching matters, right? Or are you showing up in a way that makes it seem like it's not important, right? Because we're going back to this, another theme is we're selling it, right? I learned a long time ago when I was doing in-home lessons that and this is another cheesy thing, but one of my secrets when I was doing in-homes and going to people's houses, which I loved to do for a long time, is I had awesome shoes. And I'm telling you, it was an investment, and the kids, it was a talking point. If I knew what the kids were wearing and I was slipping into what they're wearing, it was a little thing that showed I was like a serious person. Like I wore cool shoes, and it may have meant nothing, but it gave me confidence. It was a game that I played to walk into a home, be like, oh yeah, I got good shoes. That maybe I'm the lawyer I'm working for is like, oh, cool shoes. Maybe the kid, and I don't know. It's dumb. That's not dumb. It was a game I played that catered into that idea of selling this. I matter. This profession matters. We are people who have taste. We are people who are important. Because frankly, like when I first started teaching, most of the teachers at that time didn't seem super respected, right? Even the people that I was studying with, they were really culturally phenomenal and knew all these things, but they didn't really make a place for themselves in their community where they weren't talked down to at family functions, where their lawyer brother wasn't wondering why they never got a real job. And I just never bought into that.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing for the profession. You are so personable. And so any conversation you have, I think it garners respect for our profession. And you're so, I don't know, you're just so warm and friendly to all the teachers that you meet and interact with. So thank you for that. You recently started a podcast of your own. I would love to hear about that. Why did you decide it was the right time for a podcast? And can you tell us about your new podcast?
Sure. Yeah. I think I've recorded about 10 episodes. And so the backstory is Fons was acquired by a company called Peaksware a couple of years ago. And I now work for Peaksware. And Peaksware is a really interesting company out of Colorado. They have a handful of apps. Half of their company is sports apps. They own an app called Training Peaks, Train Heroic, these are apps that say the Tour de France team would use to train, or it's a coaching app for physical fitness and endurance running and all that stuff. The other half is music apps or music companies. They own Alfred Publishing, which does Suzuki. They've been around forever. It does a lot of piano pedagogy. They own Make Music, which is a mostly classroom practice app to support teachers. Fons is folded into that mix. Sadly, Finale was in that mix. But so, yes, I know, rest in peace. So that company, I worked there in the same capacity. And over time, my work is becoming more, is it evangelical? Is that the word? Where I'm more of an evangelist for the brands and getting out to talk to people. So the podcast was a really cool opportunity to tie together all this work that we've been doing, for instance, with Suzuki and with MTNA and different organizations, not just for Fons, but talking about the state of the music industry. And my idea for the podcast was to be talking to professionals like yourself, and for people of all ages, whether they're a student coming out of school and wondering how they're going to support themselves, to say, oh my gosh, you can do it. Your youth is huge energy. Let's make this happen. Or someone who's a turning point in their career, like I was, and it's like what are you going to ask the universe for? Open your eyes. And so I wanted to tell the stories of these different musicians and learn from them, because the beautiful thing that I'm learning from doing this podcast, it's called the 440, by the way, concert pitch 440. And the beautiful thing is that every person I've interviewed, so interesting, their stories are so different, how they got to do what they want to do. And I recently got to interview, I always talk about this guy, David Cutler, who wrote this book called The Savvy Music Teacher, right? And we've been friends forever. And I interviewed him. He has a part in his book that I just love, that he just keeps coming back to, one of his central themes, which is, there's two types of people. There's people that get stuff done, and then there's the people that don't. And every person, as I'm interviewing everybody, I'm like, oh, this is someone who gets stuff done. When I talk, it's like, this is how Rachel gets her stuff done. And people will share those secrets. And you can pick and choose the different and hear about these different moments in their life where an opportunity was presented and they took it, or a challenge was presented and they overcame it, or they quit and went a different direction and that opened up a different door. So the goal of the podcast is to really, again, benefit not just music teachers, but the music industry, and to try to sell that story, just like we're selling classical music, to whoa, this is, and I think, and I'm talking about this in almost every episode, which is that we talked about at the beginning when you asked about AI. And if you look in your Facebook feed or on Instagram or in the news, it's don't study the arts. Oh gosh, don't study philosophy. Don't study writing. The only thing, go be a plumber if you want to. Don't, study finance, stay away from the arts. And I hate that, but I also love it. And I was talking with a startup friend of mine. I was actually talking with the founder of that I founded Fons with, who's starting another company now and has started 3 companies since Fons. And we were talking about the power of an art degree as a technology founder or as anything, because AI will be a tool that people like myself and you will use to be able to work faster. But I would never use it to write an email or to be human. Anywhere I can be human, I'm going to be human. And so, because I've spent my life trying to develop myself as an expressive human, as we all have that's listening to this, I think that this is kind of the big kind of climax of it all, is that I think that the arts are going to explode. Because I think I can go out there against an MBA from Harvard, and I think I could start a business better, right? And maybe I could, maybe I couldn't, but I feel that way because I think I have something that I've developed that they haven't, right? I can solve a problem in a different way. I can play a Bach fugue on guitar. How bad can it be to start, a laundromat or whatever? So that's another source of optimism. And again, a long answer, but.
Well, I love your podcast. I've listened to the first couple of episodes that came out, and I think it's fantastic. And I'm going to definitely keep listening. So,
oh, well, yours is coming out, I think, in 2 weeks. Maybe I'll you know what? Maybe we'll have birthday podcasts together. I'll tell them to edit it a little bit more quickly.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. Okay, maybe we should have matching podcasts for our birthday, because your episode is so good.
Maybe that would be a little too much for listeners to have too much Eric and Rachel.
They're like, this is really weird. But
yeah. Well, Eric, can you tell listeners where they can find your podcast? Tell us about where they can find you, Fons, whatever you want to share.
Sure. Well, I'll share these links, but if you look up the 440 podcast, if you write it out, 440, or just type in 440 to any streaming platform, the podcast is there. Fons.com has everything about the platform. I'm Branner at pretty much everywhere, at Instagram, and I'll share these links you can put in the notes, and Threads and Facebook. But I'd be happy to share my email if you're listening to this, and if you're maybe a student looking at making a career in music, or if you're looking to make a transition. I really do make time and love to connect with people and hear about these stories. So I'll share my email too if there's something that you'd want to ask, or if there's something you want to reflect on. I really encourage that, and I welcome anybody to reach out and say hello. So it's eric@fons.com. It's pretty easy.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate you taking time to be here and share all of your wisdom and stories with us. And happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday to you, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
Of course. I hope that you enjoyed this episode with Eric. He has so much wisdom to share with music teachers, and he really has a pulse on music teaching because he's constantly connecting with teachers around the world. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. I'm curious, would you ever consider doubling your rates? Send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Rachel Ehring, and tell me what you think about that. That's the end of the show for this week. But next week on the podcast, I have another really great guest. Omar Roy is going to be here talking all about AI and ChatGPT. And I'm going to tell you that it was another conversation that didn't go exactly where I thought it was going to, but it was so good. So be sure to come back next week for that one. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll talk to you again next week.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.